The first person we're going to interview this morning is Brian Johnson. And Brian Johnson is the founder of Zaadz. Hi, Brian.
How are you?
Good. So tell us the basics. When did you start it? Why did you start it? And what was the date and all those kinds of things?
Yeah. So we founded Zods in September of 2004. And for me, I had built and sold another internet business and then spent some time studying philosophy and spirituality. And it was a vehicle for us to merge spirituality and capitalism. We looked online and saw that you had MySpace and Facebook was just getting going at that time, actually. A lot of people doing social networking for the general population. And we thought there was a need for, and we personally wanted to create for ourselves, a community for people who are passionate about yoga and organics, environmentalism, making a difference. So it was very much my own personal passion and the team that we had, my co-founder and I, to go out there and really create a new type of social networking site on the web.
So tell us a little bit about how this social networking works exactly.
Yeah, so
and if you did anything different than
yeah, most of us are familiar with MySpace and Facebook, so it's very much that technology. So standard profiles and an ability to interact and create your own kind of identity online, with a very important distinction of we looked at it and said, let's create a place where people's highest potential can be honored, where their aspirations and dreams to make a difference in the world can really be respected. So one of the key differentiators of our business, and one of the aspects in which we are most kind of socially responsible, if you will, is we were actually invitation only through the first 100,000 members. So we grew very, very quickly in the first 2 weeks, actually. We launched the site. It wound up kind of taking off a little bit because we had some pretty good technology, and we realized that we were attracting people who didn't necessarily resonate with our values. So we actually retroactively went into a private beta mode and deleted about 1,500 accounts and asked people to come back and actually apply to join our community. And we were very clear that we wanted to create a community that honored a certain set of ideals and values that we believed. And we like to think of it as an oasis, almost like going to a yoga studio, or a place of worship. You wouldn't jump out in the middle of the class and start yelling at someone next to you. And we thought that, with the anonymity of the web, oftentimes that's what happens. People, kind of start shouting at the slightest thing. We really wanted to create something special. So that was one of the key ways we were different, is people actually had to apply through the first maybe 25, 50,000 members with an actual, they had to answer 3 to 4 to 5 questions of why they wanted to join the community, how they wanted to change the world, and how they thought joining our community would help them in that process. So deliberately slowed our growth, which is pretty rare in the social networking get big, fast kind of world.
So you then looked at each one of these responses to these questions?
Literally, yeah. And I actually personally read the first probably 5,000 of them, and just saw the passion that people had. They came to our site and they said, look, finally I feel like I'm home. It's rare that I find people who want to make a difference in the world. And that idea that, wow, there's 100 people who think like me, there's 1,000 people, there's 10,000 people, there's 25,000 people who really think like I do. This is amazing. Wow. And we really wanted to protect and honor that.
So, and if you felt that people didn't answer the questions correctly,
Yeah, the reality is that
how did you handle that?
Very few people, didn't. Some people actually, said, well, I saw this post from the guy who I thought was an idiot and I wanted to make a comment to it. We said, okay, well, thank you very much. That isn't going to work.
So you would just send an email back and say,
Yeah, but we had a system. We actually recruited volunteers. So we had our members actually screen the application. So we had 2,500 people who had volunteered to be our ambassadors, we called them, and they actually passed out flyers in their local communities, posted them up at their yoga studios and co-ops, a one-page kind of manifesto on what we're about and to join our community, and they actually screened the applications. So we had a very simple system. It was accept, we need more information from you, or decline, and each of those had an automatic email.
But this is an excellent example. What you learned was how to target an audience and get to it and try to make sure the other people who were the shouters didn't become a part of it.
Exactly.
That's a very good piece of information. Okay. So what did you see as the main social aspects of what you were doing?
Well, I think
the actual bringing that community together is obviously one of the social aspects.
Yeah, and just the idea of empowerment. I think that community is so important to make a difference in the world. And I'm a big fan of the grassroots movement and the idea that we need to be the change that we want to see. So our slogan was, let's change the world, and it was about inspiring and empowering everyone who joined our community to be the change they wanted to see in collaboration and community with others in the community. So that was really the key aspect of it, was going to the individual consumer. We were also, big on the idea of conscious capitalism, and there's 2 parts to that equation. There's the entrepreneurial half, obviously, and the actual businesses, but I obviously look at the consumer end of it, and we need to change consumer behavior more than anything else. So how do we get these people, thinking about it and getting their voice together powerfully and sharing ideas?
So why did you sell?
Yeah, the same reason actually that led me to kind of start the business, which was my own kind of intrinsic desire to make a difference in the world. And I'm a big fan of understanding who I am and what my greatest gifts are and how I can give them to the world. So, the business was formed on the nexus of my passion for philosophy and spirituality and self-development and entrepreneurial social networking. I had built and sold another social network before. And, we got to a point where we were a tiny business, 14 employees, but, we were chronically undercapitalized, which I think is one of the topics I think is an important theme for entrepreneurs who had a much smaller deal than
we'll be sure to talk about that later.
Yeah. But anyway, realized that my own skill set was very much about coming up with a pretty good idea, being able to kind of inspire the initial growth. But frankly, I made the same mistake I did in my first business, which was I didn't hire the CFO and the operator who can help really scale it. So we found ourselves with a young, passionate team, but like I said, undercapitalized. We're worrying about our payroll, and we get 2 or 3 or 4 out, and then that creeps up again, and it's there. And found ourselves not doing quite the visionary work that we wanted to do, and a lot more of the kind of the grinding, if you will. And I've, kind of looked at my own skill sets and looked at the couple of my, mentors and people I respect a lot, John Mackey over at Whole Foods and Jirka Risovi at Gaia. And these are guys who I believe this is what they do really well. They're able to build these businesses of scale. And it became a really simple decision when I kind of opened that idea of collaboration and seeing that I didn't need to do this alone, that there were, we're struggling to put another $200,000 in the bank, and these guys have Gaia, which is the business that wound up buying ours, is sitting on $200 million of capital. And I really thought it was an opportunity to reward our shareholders, to get our employees out of that kind of energy of worrying about that type of thing, and with the deep pockets of these resources, and then the broader reach of Gaia kind of all together, and then my own personal sense of what I'm here to do. It just made sense.
You were ready to do the next thing.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't even so much the next thing. It was like, it was the next thing, but more just this is right for our business right now.
So did you actually go to Gaia directly, or did you talk to others first?
Well, I was very clear on who I was willing to sell the business to, and there,
you had to share your values, et cetera.
Completely. Yeah. I mean, it was a non-starter, to even look at anything else. And I had retained an investment bank when I sold my first business, and I'd kind of been through that process. And I'd raised $5 million in my first business as a 24-year-old entrepreneur, and I lost control, so I understand what it was like to work with VCs. So this time around, I raised $3 million, but I had 100% voting control. So I was a common shareholder, but my preferred class didn't have voting rights. So the decision was completely mine. I got clarity. And Jirka Risovi from Gaia, actually, I had met with him a couple months before, and I was in the mode at that point of never selling, I'm going to build this thing out. And so I pretty much blew him off in that first meeting. He would have bought us that day, literally. Just wasn't interested in that at the time. And then, gave him a call Sunday evening, and he scheduled a flight out for Tuesday. We spent Tuesday and Wednesday together at a cafe over lunch and dinner, and put together a deal that made perfect sense, and 25-page, maybe 30-page document. We didn't have a lot of moving parts. We were a tiny business. We were clear on what we wanted to do, and within 30 days, we had the deal done, the cash in the bank, and ready to go.
Describe the deal. What was the nature? Did you sell the business, hold all the 100% of the business to Gaia?
Yeah.
Were there any other particulars about the deal that's worth noting?
I mean, again, the deal was just so simple and so straightforward, and he was so committed to our values, and that was why he was acquiring us, was we fit so well into his business, both as a marketing tool and as he was most excited about our team. We had 14 young, passionate people, and he was literally talked about injecting our culture into his broader culture. So the deal was remarkably simple.
Okay, so he bought it, and what's happened?
So this was only 8 months ago. So
only 8 months ago.
We're still really in the early phase. But
the people haven't had to move. They've been
some have relocated. Others, we were virtual to begin with. We didn't have an office. So I had developers in South Africa. I had some across the country. So we were already virtual. So a few of our people went over to Boulder, which is where their headquarters are, and the rest are still working remotely.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. There wasn't any written contract of you staying involved afterwards in any way?
No, I was pretty clear on that as well, just where I was and kind of what my role would be going forward. And I had taken myself out of the operational day-to-day stuff already. Okay. So my two top people running that.
Have you maintained any role?
Just an advisory. So I support the the top 3 people who are kind of there, but not an active role.
And so what do you think you did right in this deal? And what do you think you would have done differently? So and not only this deal, but the first deal as well.
Yeah, well, I think that the deal itself, I feel really good about. I think it was great for everybody. All of our stakeholders, I think, did really well with what we were doing, and not without some challenges, obviously. But I think I'm really happy with that. In hindsight, looking at it, I think again it was what led to the deal. That I could have done differently as an entrepreneur, and looking at my own skill set and kind of the need in the marketplace. I think as we look at social responsible investing and selling to larger businesses, et cetera. I think for me, the challenge came at the raising of money. And I think Seth mentioned that there's only so much angel money out there. And there's plenty, I think, for what we were doing. But there's beauty to the venture model, I think, when you have partners who you trust. And we needed support building out the management team. I'm a visionary in a lot of ways and passionate, enthusiastic, but I'm not an operator, And to have that support and that mentorship, I think is a huge value add. So I would have gone back and hired a CFO as one of my first hires and gotten someone who was really passionate and really skilled at building a business and taken us out of that need to constantly be in the fundraising state, which I think would have absolutely impacted the speed with which we sold. So given the context, I'm really happy with what we did. If I was going to rewind it all the way, that's what I would have done really early on in the business.
Okay, good. You mentioned something to me earlier before we sat down here that you thought was really wonderful to share, and that is this relationship between the VCs and the angels and the relationships building there. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, we were having the conversations as well about what Randy's doing with another alternative for acquisitions. Right. I think that we need to have conscious venture guys. I look at there's as much angel money as there is out there, but there's a reason why venture capital works in a lot of ways, and I think we can take the best of the venture model and apply the consciousness we're talking about here and really partner with entrepreneurs, and be able to bring in the, going out and raising 25, 50, 100,000, even up to $1 million from the angel guys, which is what I did, from 2,500 to $1 million, 1.2 million. It's kind of the range of what I did. It'd be a heck of a lot easier if I can go out and raise the $5 million, in one shot from a couple of venture partners, and then have that done, and also then have their support, because I do think they have obviously a lot to offer, done right with the management support and kind of that forward thinking. So I'd love to see that. I'd love to see more energy go toward that, and I think there's a need there in the marketplace, and I'm excited to see that come to fruition, because I know that a lot of entrepreneurs of my generation and kind of my experience level face exactly the same challenges.
I think we'll ask Randy to say something about that in a few minutes here, but let me ask one last question. If you kind of look into your heart and you say, okay, there's these other people in their early 20s maybe, right, who are like me, very aware of the internet world and all these new possibilities to have venture, virtual offices, et cetera. What is the main thing that you would like to share with them about what you've learned from this experience?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll say I'm so inspired. I mean, these guys, talking to them about what they're doing, it's just, I'm so inspired by that.
But the two young fellows here,
just the entrepreneurs who are out there following their passion. It's interesting because the thing that resonates in my mind, in my first business, I hired the CEO of Adidas to be our CEO. We were a sports-based business, and he came on. And I remember him vividly telling me, remember a couple things about business. One, business is simple. Keep it that way. It doesn't need to get complicated. And two, trust your instincts. And that's something that really resonates deeply with me. And we got into the game of overspending a bit as well and needing to raise the money. And I think the idea, there's something sexy and alluring about raising a lot of money, but there's also the patience and the diligence to just go out and kind of take the next step, and to manage that cash flow, as Seth mentioned as well, and really keep things simple, while you evolve as an entrepreneur and as you kind of gain the expertise and the experience and the momentum to invite the resources and the mentorship to kind of take the next step. So that'd be my biggest thing. And then follow your heart. End of the day, I think that's the number one rule for me.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Cool. Let's see if anyone has any questions for Brian here. And Randy, I think would be nice. Micah, why don't we give the microphone to Randy first? Randy, why don't you say a few things about you and Sonny are starting Satori, and how you're thinking of going about it differently that resonates with what he's been saying.
Yeah, sure. Randy Eisman and my partner, Sonny Vanderbeck. We, for the last couple years, have been investing in socially conscious businesses. And one, we saw a financial opportunity. Two, we saw a societal opportunity. Three, we really liked the people that we were interacting with. And really, after 3 years, we decided we need to do this on a grander scale. So to Brian's point, instead of writing $25,000 checks, raise a fund so we can write $5 million checks, $10 million checks, provide an alternative to companies like Brian's, like Seth's, when they're seeking liquidity or seeking an exit. So in our opinion, there are a whole new generation of entrepreneurs that want to build principle-centered businesses that absolutely want to do well financially but also do well societally. And they seek a different kind of capital partner. They seek a capital partner that lives with their values, that views business as a force for positive social change. And so as we put ourselves out there, and there are other firms like us that are focusing on different parts of the market, hopefully as we put ourselves out there, there will almost be a magnet between us and the investors where there's that shared value system.
Randy, let me ask you another question.
Sure.
Do you see yourself probably being more involved with a slower growth situation? Do you see yourself being more involved with helping the business grow, and if the owner wants to stay in the business, keeping the business, rather than selling it when you think it's a hot time to sell?
Yeah, I mean, for Sonny's and mine, our firm's criteria, the first thing on our criteria list is they need to have this sort of socially responsible intent and have taken some action. So that's sort of the first screen. Secondly, these need to be on their own very strong businesses. So we're looking for growing businesses with strong cash flow. So good businesses, and then hopefully with our experience, some of our background, our network, as well as the capital, we can help accelerate the growth. But it's very important that for us, that we get involved with healthy, already growing business and hopefully can just help accelerate that growth.
I really want to take you onto that second part of that question, which was, if the owner doesn't want to sell, wants to keep growing their business, are you comfortable staying with them in that and maybe finding a way to exit? Or would you be putting a lot of pressure on them to sell if you felt that was the best financial decision?
Yeah, I mean, we fundamentally believe as a firm that great businesses get created over a longer period of time. If you think about the Whole Foods, the Southwest Airlines, the Googles even, it takes time to build something great. And so I think we will be more patient capital than most. It doesn't mean that we'll never sell, exactly. And it doesn't mean that we're not focused on getting a return for ourselves and our investors. But if you buy great businesses that produce good cash flows, you're going to have a lot of alternatives for making money for your shareholders. Dividend checks are pretty nice. I mean, we've found that investors like to get good dividend checks and own very good businesses for a long period of time. And we're big students of Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, and he likes to say his favorite holding period is forever. So if we're in partnership with a great team and a great business that's generating great returns for investors, we may hold it for decades.
So you're going to try to be the socially responsible Berkshire Hathaway?
If you say so.
Okay.
That's sort of in our dream.
That's in your framework. Okay.
But the truth of the matter is, Warren Buffett has done, and Berkshire Hathaway has done a fantastic job becoming the buyer of choice for these very large family-run businesses that get very, very successful, and at some point need a liquidity event. Some firms will probably get that spot in the socially conscious business world, and hopefully it's us, and hopefully there's a whole ecosystem of firms like Satori Capital that emerge, because the stronger the ecosystem is, the more likely entrepreneurs will want to build their businesses in this way. And to use your words from last night, that really does serve the common good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Randy. Sonny, do you want to add anything to that by any chance?
I think it's difficult to follow that. Randy covered a lot of ground. One thing that I would add that we've explored a lot as a firm, and I think you'll see us speak on more in the future, is the role of the capital markets in business and in socially conscious businesses. And I think part of our opportunity is not just to have a different perspective about how we deploy capital and how we work with our portfolio companies, but to also have our limited partners, have them in alignment. And I think that choosing who the original source of the capital, we think maybe some of the challenges that are going on right now can actually be traced all the way back to the objectives and expectations of the original source of the capital, not the firm that's responsible for deploying it. And so that's part of how we expect to cross the gap.
That very much speaks to Gary's situation last night, doesn't it, with
Yes.
the Stonyfield Farms, that he got a lot of pressure from his investors to exit, which when people get older will happen. Is there anyone else who wants to say anything? Yes, there we go.
Well, I just wanted to congratulate you for finding someone who was both spiritually and conceptually aligned in terms of how a business should be managed.
Yeah.
Because my personal belief is when you do that, you have to rely less on 2 to 3 inch thick
Yep.
acquisition agreements,
Yep.
because you've got that understanding at a heart and soul level.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to congratulate you on that. I think it's a wonderful model and example for how socially responsible businesses can, in fact, be acquired and maintain their values.
Cool. Thank you.
Has there been anything that's happened over the last 8 months that has given you pause?
No, I think there's natural, challenges of just, having our young culture. Having said that, we're still integrating into a, publicly traded business that does things in a publicly traded business type of way. So we didn't do things in that way. Instant messages with me to get things done, is a little different. Little things like we changed the legal policy on the website to be in accordance with what they needed to see as a publicly traded business, and it actually created a little uproar in the community, because we had a very liberal statement before, and it was those small things that we did so well that made us grow, and people knew we cared about them. So I think that's the inherent challenge, is to show that we are part of a bigger company, but we still have the heart and the passion and the commitment to the community. So there's a couple of things like that. Then operationally and personnel-wise, although committed, there's still the challenge of, okay, how exactly does this person fit into that scenario? And the reality is that they don't all fit in perfectly. So dealing with those evolutions.
Yeah, so that's
has been
pretty
part of it.
natural.
Yeah.
Did someone else have a question over here? Yes.
Actually, I think you created the entree for the question I had, which was, you talked about the philosophical underpinning of your enterprise, and that, in fact, the business you built was a community of people that decided to join you. So to what degree did you involve them, if at all, in the decision to sell? Because in essence, you're selling them.
Yep. They were not involved in the decision to sell beyond my own communication about my own kind of vision and process. And we were talking about this last night. Just my heart and soul was very much part of the magnet of kind of building that community, my own experiences with challenges integrating spirituality and capitalism. So inherently, no one likes change. So, so there's the vocal, I believe, minority who are, what's going on here. And for us, that really created an opportunity for further discussion, because a lot of people have the big equals bad dialogue. And so it was an opportunity to engage in that conversation about why we did what we did. And even metaphorically, we named our business Zods after the Dutch word for seed, right? And then Gaia, is based on the, goddess from Mother Earth. So the metaphor we used was we planted our seed, into this fertile Mother Earth, and the resources that we now have is a powerful thing. So we lost some people in the transition, but I think we also deepened relationships with others, and it's also very early still to kind of see how the momentum's going to create. And frankly, my attitude was less that I needed to be the one to do it, and the community is going to prove whether it has a vitality to itself or not. And there's a lot of other splinter social networks that have been inspired by Zods, and we'll see, in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years whether Zods continues to kind of be one of the leading sources for that, which I believe it will be, or if there will be other intentional communities that kind of come out of that. So, long-winded answer to your question, but.
Did the employees get a better benefit package? I would assume that they probably did. You probably haven't developed
we were
those.
pretty generous. I mean, we were actually really generous.
Okay.
That was one of the things I was committed to, and I spent a lot of time too. My commitment was they're not cogs in a wheel. So I really worked hard to figure out who they were, what they were most passionate about, and shape the job around their gifts. But yeah, they did great on that.
Okay, the last thing I want to ask you is that I know you're starting a new business. So I think it'd be fun for people to know what that is.
Appreciate it. So leaving the business, realized that, my dharma, as I say, are kind of what I want to give to the world is being able to distill these universal truths that guide my life into a practical philosophy for the 21st century. So simply the business I'm creating now is called Philosopher's Notes, which is very much like Cliff's Notes, simple summaries of books for self-development books. So the idea being that we're passionate about living at our highest potential, but we also have a life and we're quite busy and often don't have the time to invest our energy into studying all of the wisdom that we want to study, whether it's Rumi or Nietzsche or modern guys like Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle. We've got this stack of books, in our offices or in our homes we just haven't had the time to get to. So this is a resource that in 20 minutes we can get through the big ideas of these great books. So
if I want to kind of figure out what the essence of Eckhart Tolle's point of view is, I can go to philosophers.
Yeah, so literally,
notes. Is it philosophers or
philosophers notes? Both plural.
And .com, and then I'd be able to look up Eckhart Tolle, and then I'd be able to get a summary
That's exactly
of
right.
A New Earth.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's 10 big ideas in New Earth, and he's a beautiful writer, and he's done some great things. But in 20 minutes we can look at those 10 big ideas.
Lovely, wonderful.
Cool.
Thank you, Brian.
Awesome.
Very
Thank
much.
you so much.